Hello, class. This recording of this lecture will be about anthropology, also known as the doctrine of human beings or mankind. So let's get started. Let's look at the original created conditions. God is absolutely perfect, and it follows therefore that his creation was also perfect. Moses declared, "The rock, his work is perfect." David added, "As for God, his way is blameless." Jesus said, "Therefore you are to be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Nothing less than the perfect can come from an absolutely perfect being, God. And it befits the perfect being to make only perfect beings, for the effects bear the image of their cause. The original state of innocence and perfection. According to Genesis chapters 1 and 2, Adam and Eve were created with complete innocence. They had no evil in their natures or their environment. They were not ashamed, and they did not know good and evil. In short, they were not only guiltless of any sin, but also innocent of sin. Further, the very temptation to be like God, knowing good and evil, implies they did not know evil before they fell. Indeed, when they ate the forbidden fruit, the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. According to the New Testament, by disobedience, Adam and Eve became sinful and brought condemnation on themselves and their posterity. So then, as through one transgression there resulted condemnation to all men, before this they were flawless. God endowed Adam and Eve with moral perfection. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes 7:29, "Behold, I have found only this, that God made men upright, but they have sought out many devices." The Hebrew word for upright is yashar, meaning straightness, uprightness, honesty, or integrity. It is the same word used in connection with righteousness, blameless, and pure. Consequently, yashar does not merely denote the absence of evil, but also the presence of good. It is not simply the lack of vice, but the reality of virtue. Adam and Eve had a perfect environment. There was no sin in Eden, a paradise of goodness. God had made it, and everything God made was very good. There was no moral imperfection in Eden. It was flawless in every way. There was no tendency toward evil from within Adam, and there was nothing evil about his created environment around him. Creation was not subject to corruption as it was after the fall. There was no human death, and both internal and external natures were absolutely perfect. In the original created state, humankind was not a servant of nature, but a master over it. Man did not serve under its strong hand, rather it served his, for nature was subject to humanity. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Adam and Eve had a state of moral responsibility. In Genesis 2:16, we read, "The Lord had commanded the man, saying, From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it, you will surely die." God had given an order, and Adam had a responsibility to obey his Creator. As we know, at this, Adam fell miserably. Adam was free in that his actions were self-determined. God specifically said, "You are free." When Adam chose to disobey, God blamed him, asking, "Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" God said, "What is this you have done?" No one else made Adam and Eve commit sin, including the devil, who tempted them. Such is the self-determining nature of freedom. The presence of the tempter. The perfect persons that God created, Adam and Eve, who were in a perfect paradise, were not without an imperfect intruder, Satan. Satan, a fallen angel of God, had rebelled against the Creator, sweeping with him a third of all the angels. By clever deception, the great deceiver led Eve and then through her Adam into disobedience against God. By a free and uncoerced choice of their wills, the perfect pair in the perfect paradise fell into imperfection, and their world with them. Their disobedience led to death and destruction. What Adam and Eve were vulnerable to was a test as to whether they would obey God simply because He said it. The temptation to sin was in the enticement to defy God and subsequently to be conscious of the evil of choosing against Him. Let's look at the origin of the human soul. The pre-existent view. This view, stemming from Plato, asserts that all souls existed before the world began. They are eternal and uncreated. The pre-existence view has been declared heretical, since it contradicts the clear teaching of Scripture about the creation of human beings. The second view, the creation view. This view maintains God directly creates a new individual soul for everyone born into this world. While the body of each new human being is generated by his or her parents through a natural process, the soul is supernaturally created by God. The third view is called the Traducian view. The word traducian comes from the Latin tradux, meaning branch of a vine. This view maintains that each new human being is a branch off of his or her parents. In the Traducian model, both soul and body are generated by a God-ordained process through the father and mother. A contrast of views: Creationists versus Traducianists. First, Traducianists reject that God directly creates a new individual soul for everyone born into this world. Rather, they observe that creation was completed on the sixth day, according to Genesis 2:2, Deuteronomy 4:32, and Matthew 13:35, and that God is resting and has not created since, Hebrews 4:4. Further, Creationists, in contrast, maintain that man is a soul and has a body. Traducianists maintain that man is a unity of soul/body, and note that the scientific evidence for how an individual human soul begins is clear. The English word translated soul comes from the Hebrew nephesh in the Old Testament and the Greek psyche in the New Testament, both of which means life. A human life is a human soul. Human life comes from the sperm and ovum of his or her parents, and is first conceived in the womb as a fully individual person. We continue on this slide. Finally, Traducianists point out that the creationist view does not explain the inheritance of original sin. Certainly, a perfect God would not create a fallen soul, nor can we accept the Gnostic idea that the contact of a pure soul with a material body in the womb precipitates its fall. The most reasonable explanation is that both fallen soul and body are naturally generated from one's parents. Biblical terms of the immaterial dimension of human beings, soul and spirit. The term soul, nephesh, Greek psyche, is often biblically used of more than the spiritual dimension of human beings. Sometimes the body is included. However, there are scriptural references to the soul as being distinguished from the body. Genesis 35:18 speaks of Rachel's soul leaving the body at death. Revelation 6:9 speaks of souls totally separated from the bodies in heaven. We look at spirit now. The word spirit comes from the Hebrew ruach and Greek pneuma. Almost always refers to the immaterial dimension of a human being. It is often used interchangeably with the word soul as indicated in many verses. The body without the soul is dead. At death, Jesus bowed his head and gave up his spirit. We continue. We look at the word heart. The term heart, Hebrew leb and Greek cardia, has a broader meaning, sometimes even including the mind. Essentially, heart refers to the whole inner person. It is from the heart from which true faith springs. The heart is the instrument with which we are to worship God. The heart is also the seat of evil. Jeremiah 17:9 tells us the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. We look at the mind. The mind, the Greek word nous, refers to the immaterial dimension of a human being by which he or she thinks and imagines. Jesus included it in the Great Commandment. And who shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength? Paul writes, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Inward man is another term of the immaterial dimension of human beings. But though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. We see Paul wrote that in 2 Corinthians 4:16. Thus it is related to things that are eternal. Now we look at biblical terms used of the material dimension of human beings. We see body. The word body, Hebrew bazar and Greek soma, is normally used of the outer material aspect of human nature. The body can decay and be destroyed. In fact, it is the body that is called dead when the spirit leaves it. However, the body is reconstructible by God, and it will be resurrected from the dead. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 15 through 44 and verse 53. Also, we see the biblical term flesh, which refers to the material dimension of human beings. The word flesh, the Hebrew bazar and the Greek sarx, when referring to a physical human being, nearly always includes the outer dimension made of matter. Jesus said, see my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. The same word is also used of the resurrected body. Biblical terms used of the material dimension of human beings continue. The earthen vessel. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. Earthen vessel, in the King James Version, is an appropriate illustration of the human body, since it is an outer structure containing something else, a soul inside. The same is true of the following example, a figure of speech presenting the body as a tent or house. We see earthly tent next. For we know that if the earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Indeed, when Jesus assumed a body in the incarnation, he dwelled, literally pitched his tent in our midst. In the same way, the body is the material shell that is in this world, but houses the presence of the immaterial soul. And then we see the term outward man. But though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. You see, thus it relates to things external. Anthropological hylomorphism. We see in parentheses soul/body unity. The term hylomorphism is from the Greek hulo, which means matter, and morphos, which means form. Hylomorphism holds that there is a form/matter unity between soul and the body. The roots of the view are found in the beliefs of Aristotle, though it has earlier basis in the Old Testament, and it was later corroborated by Thomas Aquinas. The evidence for hylomorphism can be divided into biblical and philosophical. The biblical basis, then, for a body-soul unity is this. Human beings are described as a soul/body unity from the very beginning. Genesis 2:7. Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. That is, the whole unity of dust, matter, and breath life was a vital being. Furthermore, the word soul means person, and it often includes the body. For example, in Psalm 16:10, David records, "For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay." Obviously, soul here includes the body, which, as prophesied regarding Jesus Christ, did not see corruption but was resurrected. Also, the word soul sometimes even refers to a dead body. In addition, if both soul and body were not created as a unity, then the murder of a body would not be wrong, but it is, as stated in Genesis 9:6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. We see, again, more evidence from the biblical basis for a body-soul unity. Even more, the Bible declares that a soul without a body is naked and incomplete. This would not be so unless there was a powerful unity between them. 2 Corinthians 5:1 reads, "For we know that if the earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For indeed in this house we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven, inasmuch as we, having put it on, will not be found naked. For indeed, while we are in this tent, we groan, being burdened, because we do not want to be unclothed, but to be clothed, so that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life." Finally, resurrection makes no sense unless we are incomplete without a body. God's word declares that all human beings, saved or lost, will be resurrected. Without the body, we are not whole, lacking in our very nature as a human being. Other reasons to support the unity of soul and body. The analogy with animals. The same Hebrew word used for the soul of humans, nephesh, is also used of animals. Indeed, even the word spirit is used of an animal. Therefore, while animals are alive, there is a form/matter unity between their soul and their body. The same is true of human beings, the only difference being that the human soul survives death and lives on consciously between death and resurrection. The interpenetration of the soul and body. What is more, there's clearly an interpenetration of the soul and body which befits a form/matter unity. Interpenetration means that the soul influences the body and vice versa. For example, grief in the soul affects the body and pain in the body affects the mind. This psychosomatic affiliation indicates not identity but unity. How can the soul survive alone without the body? The soul and body are a unity, not an identity. If they are identical, then of course one could not survive without the other. By analogy, the soul is to the body what thought in the mind is to words on paper. The concept remains when the material perishes. The Bible informs us that the soul does survive when the body dies. To be sure, the soul is incomplete without the body, and it does await the resurrection of the body when it will once again be complete. 2 Corinthians 5:1. But survival as a soul without a body is not impossible or contradictory. Both God and angels are purely spiritual, yet they exist without physical form. It is assumed, then, that in the intermediate disembodied state between death and the bodily resurrection, the soul of human beings will exist as angels presently do. Elements of human personhood. We see these are an indication of a person. Intellect. Human beings were created with self-reflected minds that have the power of syllogistic reasoning. The power of human reasoning also places people above the unreasoning animals. While intellect enables humans to worship God, its inventiveness also makes it capable of great evil. However, by redemption, the mind is renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. Another element of personhood is emotion. In addition to rational thinking, human beings are capable of deep emotions and feelings such as joy and sorrow. Unlike the mythical androids, humans are more than minds and wills. They have a heart. Another element of human personhood is the will. Unlike animals, human beings were created with a moral capacity to know right from wrong and the will to choose one over the other. Genesis 2:16 and 17 says, "From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it you will surely die." Another element is conscience. Human beings are unique from all other creatures on earth in that within their very natures they have a God-given moral capacity called conscience. Even in our fallen state, God holds us responsible for avoiding evil. Of course, a fallen conscience is fallible. It reflects an innate capacity to know right from wrong, but it does not guarantee that it will always be accurate. It can be distorted by culture and choices, and at times even seared by intense evil. There is nonetheless an objective moral law, even though our fallen understanding of it is obscured by sin. Other abilities included of human personhood include the capacity to laugh, the ability to enjoy music and art, which is only possible for rational beings. The inherent capacity to appreciate and savor beauty is a God-given part of human nature that is part of His universal revelation to all human beings. And the sources for this recording, the information comes from pages 17 through 79 of Norman Geisler's Systematic Theology, Volume